Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to continue looking at the science portion of the ACT today. What I wanted to talk about is something known as reporting categories. You can just think of these as question types. So each question that you get falls into one of three different reporting categories or question types. And if you know what they're looking for, it makes answering the questions a little bit easier. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. We've talked a lot about the different passages that are on the science portion of the ACT. Now I'm going to talk about the different types of questions that are on the science portion of the ACT. And we just call those reporting categories. Sometimes you'll even see it abbreviated as RC. So if I'm talking about RC or reporting categories, I'm just talking about the types of questions that are on the science portion of the test. Okay, so what are reporting categories? Well, there's three different types. You have interpretation of data, which is abbreviated as IOD. You have scientific investigation, which is abbreviated as SIN. And then the last reporting category is evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results, which is abbreviated as EMI. Each item or question on the ACT science test falls into one of these three categories. These are based on the skills the ACT is designed to test. They can be further classified based on the specific skill being tested. And that's what I wanted to look at today. Okay, so as far as the amount of these different reporting categories, the IOD, the interpretation of data, this is the most common item. It makes up 50% of the tests. So half of all the questions are going to be of this type. This type of question requires you to locate and compare data, as well as these are very common on data representation passages, and you rarely find them on conflicting viewpoints. These are going to ask questions on tables and figures. So again, the interpretation of data, these are very common, and we find them on the data representation passages. That makes sense because the data representation passages are trying to represent data, and then you're going to get questions on interpreting that data. Okay, the next type of reporting category, the scientific investigation, this makes up anywhere from 25 to 35% of the questions. This is going to ask questions about the design, methods, and purpose of the results of the experiments. And these are most common on research summaries. So again, this can make up about a quarter to about a third of the ACT questions. These are very, very common on the research summaries because what the research summary passages do is they summarize some sort of research or experiments that was done in the scientific community, and then you're going to be asked questions on how that experiment was done or what the results were. And then the last type of reporting category is the abbreviation is EMI. That stands for evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results. These make up anywhere from 20 to 30% of the science portion, and these questions are often about conclusions, predictions, and hypotheses. And although they can be on any type, these are often on the conflicting viewpoints passages. So what I wanted to do now, these are the three different reporting categories or the three types of questions, and then I wanted to look at the breakdown, what the easy questions are asking you to do, and then what the more difficult questions are asking you to do. So first of all, let's look at the interpretation of data. You can see that there, although this is just one reporting category, there's a lot of different skills that it's testing. I won't read every single one of them off to you, but I did want to read some of the easier ones and some of the harder ones. So at the top, the 201, that is the easiest type of IOD question. And then down at the bottom, the 505 is the hardest type of IOD question that you'll get. And they're listed as far as their difficulty. So the higher they are, the easier they are, the lower they are, the harder they are. Also, remember that on the science portion of the ACT, for each passage, the question is arranged based off of its difficulty. So the first couple of questions might be asking you to do this type of stuff, but question 5 and 6 for the passage will be asking you to do the stuff at the bottom. So let's read IOD 201 real quick and see what this is asking you to do. This says select one piece of data from a data presentation. Okay, That is very, very easy to do. It's the easiest type of IOD question you're going to have. In fact, it's so easy that a lot of times when a student gets to this question, they think it's a trick question and that they're missing something. These type of questions are the ones that will say, according to figure 1, what was this variable doing at 30 degrees Celsius? It'll be something like that. And it's literally just a matter of going to find the figure that it told you to and then looking at the value and finding the answer. If you get a question like that, it is not a trick question. They're just testing a very easy skill. They want you to be able to do that. So if you feel like a question is a trick question, that's kind of a good thing. That means you get it. But you should just answer the question and move on. Don't waste your time searching for information that you don't need. They're not trying to trick you. They're just seeing if you can do this very easy thing, selecting one piece of data from a data representation or a data presentation. Okay? Let's just look at the next couple off the top, and we'll talk about those a little bit too. So IOD 203 says, find information in text that describes a data presentation. So this one, instead of going to look at a table or a graph, this is, you might need to go read some of the passage. But it's the same thing. It's just finding information. Okay? Now let's look at some of the ones at the bottom down here. These are the most difficult types of IOD questions you'll get. Let's read IOD 404. This says, perform an interpolation or extrapolation using data in a table or graph. So this is where the question will often say, imagine we did this other trial, or suppose we did this trial the same way, but we changed it like this. If you get a question like that, those are the more difficult ones. And if you get a question that's asking, it's saying suppose or what if we did this, what it's telling you is that it's not on the graph. You have to kind of use the graph to make a best guess. Okay? All right, I'll read the last one here and we'll move on. So IOD 505 says, analyze presented data when given new information. So again, what this will do is it'll often say, suppose we find this new information out, and then you have to go see how it's going to line up in the table or graphs. So you can see that the ones at the top and the ones at the bottom are testing vastly different skills, but the difficulty on these are very, very different as well. Again, for each passage, the questions are arranged from least difficult to most difficult. So you might get some of the ones at the top for questions 1, 2, and 3, but then when you get to questions 5, 6, and 7, you'll probably be using these skills down at the bottom. Okay, so that's the IOD. Let's look at the next reporting category. This is scientific investigation, often abbreviated as SIN. Okay, so let's look at some of the easier ones and some of the harder ones. Okay, so SIN 201 says, find information in text that describes an experiment. Same thing as what I was talking about for that other really easy one. Don't let easy questions trick you. They need to test a variety of skills. So you're going to get some questions from up here and you're going to get some questions from down here. Okay, so if you get an easy question, don't waste time by thinking it's a trick question. You just got lucky. You got an easy question. Pick the right answer and move on. Okay, let's look at some of these other ones. So SIN 404 says identify similarities and differences between experiments. Okay, so this is when you're going to have to compare and contrast some experiments. We've done a couple of those practice questions earlier. Okay, let's look at some of the more difficult ones down here. So SIN 702 says predict the effects of modifying the design or methods of an experiment. So you can see that for the more difficult ones, we saw this on the last reported category, we're seeing it down here too. The more difficult ones are asking you to predict information. So what that means is that the information is really not on the chart or in the passage somewhere. You have to use the information that you're given and kind of synthesize a new answer. And so that's why those are the more difficult ones, is because it's not just something you can point to. You kind of have to use the information available and then come up with the best answer. All right, let's read the last one and then we'll look at that last reporting category. So SIN 703 says determine which additional trial or experiment could be performed to enhance or evaluate the experimental results. So again, the ones where you're having to predict or synthesize or extrapolate or interpolate information, those are the very difficult ones. Those are the ones that it's okay to spend a couple more seconds on. Maybe instead of 50 seconds, you spend 60 or 70 seconds. That's okay because those are the harder ones. Those are the ones that are going to need more time. But if you get an easy question that's just asking you to find something, answer it and move on so that you can have more time on where you need it, right? All right, let's look at the last reporting category. So this is evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results. These skills are the ones that are on the data representation and the research summary passages. We use different skills for the conflicting viewpoints. Let's look at some of the easy ones here. So this says EMI 401, determine which hypothesis, prediction, or conclusion is or is not consistent with a data presentation or a piece of text. Okay, so that's one of the easier skills for this. Let's look at one of the harder skills. EMI 502 says, determine whether presented information or new information supports or contradicts a hypothesis or conclusion and why. Same thing, we're kind of seeing a pattern here. The easy questions are asking you to find something. The harder questions are asking you to fit in new information into the passage or into the table, the graph, and try to find a best answer there. So some of these easier questions have a definite answer, and then some of the harder ones, because you're kind of predicting, it's more of a best answer situation. So definite answer and then best answer down here. All right, so let's look at the EMIs for the conflicting viewpoints. These are a little bit different because the conflicting viewpoint is having you do something different than the data representation, and the research summary, the skills are a little bit different too. All right, so let's read EMI 201. This says, find basic information in a viewpoint. That's very easy to do. That is something you're going to be able to point your finger at on the test and find the correct answer. I mean, the skill says find. So this is almost like a reading comprehension question, right? Let's look at the next easiest one. EMI 301 says, identify implications and assumptions in a viewpoint. So this is a little bit more difficult. You're not going to be able to just point your finger to it, but you're going to have to use that information to either reject or accept a viewpoint. All right, let's look at some of the more difficult ones down here. So EMI 603 says, use new information to make a prediction based on a viewpoint. Two things I want to point out. New information, predict. We're seeing that those are the difficult skills because they're not just skills that you can look at and point at on the test. You have to use your brain to kind of figure out what the answer is. So if you get questions like that, it's okay to spend more time on them. All right, here's the most difficult type of EMI. EMI 602 says, explain why presented information or new information supports or weakens a viewpoint. So this one, the reason this one is so difficult is because you have to do a lot of the skills above it. In order to figure out if new information supports or weakens an argument, you're going to have to be able to find what their stance is to begin with. So this skill is so difficult because you have to do some of the ones up here and then justify the correct answer. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to go over these with you. I know I didn't hit every single one, but feel free just to back up and pause the video where you need to. These are all the different skills that are on the science portion of the ACT. When you get your results, they're going to tell you how many of the EMI, how many of the SIN, how many of the IOD you got correct or incorrect. If you're missing a lot of one of the reporting categories, these are the skills that you should work on. So let's say you take the test, you get your results back, and you did not get very many of these EMI questions right. Maybe you only got 10% of these correct. Well, these would be the skills that you would want to go back and practice. Specifically, these down here. You know, the harder ones are going to be the ones that take more practice on, but you might be able to practice doing the easier ones in a very quick way so that you are giving yourself more time on the more difficult ones. Okay? So I wanted to make sure I hit all of those with y'all. When I see y'all next time, we'll talk about ways to incorporate these and some ideas for success or how to improve them. Your teacher has some other work for you to do, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.